Hey everybody, it's Yafa here. I got a question and emailed to me, and so I want to read it to you and share my ideas with you guys. So it says, um, let's see, I could really use some guidance for how I can best help my son, who's 7 years old, when he is having an outburst or a tantrum. This happens most frequently when he is getting upset or frustrated while playing a video game, and he starts crying and saying really negative statements about how terrible he is. I try to de-escalate with humor, distraction, and offering help, and sometimes that works. Other times he gets more and more upset, and I tell him to put down the game to calm him down and try to use the many calm down techniques we practice. He has reached the point of getting so angry that he broke a game system. So I do feel putting it down and calming is important. This often results in him screaming and hitting himself and saying ugly things to me and about himself. Today, I was wishing he never existed and he is a terrible person and more. I am sure there are other people, person that wrote this question, I'm speaking to you right now. I'm sure there are other people that feel that also. And thank you for being really candid. And then it goes on. If I sit quietly near him, he screams that I am ignoring him. If I try to negate the statements, he argues them more. I would appreciate any ideas on how to support him through this. We do practice calming techniques when he is calm, too, but when he needs to use them, he just screams that they don't work. If I try to guide deep breathing, he just hyperventilates. Thanks so much. There are some really, really, really good points here. So let me work my way through. So first of all, let's remember that somebody who has ADHD or has a neurodivergent brain tends to be less mature emotionally than his or her peers of the same age. They may be really smart, like off the chart smart, but they do tend to be younger. So that's like 2 or 3 years younger. So when you think about it in that way, 7 is really only 4 or 5 years old emotionally. And I think that's part of what you're seeing. Also, I know this is not easy, and those of you that are listening, I don't want you to assume this is impossible, what I'm about to say, because it's not impossible, although it can be hard to do. But I think I would take away any game that, not take away in a mean way, but if he can't handle the game, if he's, harming himself by saying, negative things about himself, I don't think he's ready for that game. There are games that, I don't know what they are, but I know that there are games that will reinforce positive attitudes towards himself and others. I don't think this level of gaming is appropriate for him. I think that, I remember I was a really sensitive kid, and there were times that there were certain things that just scared me so bad. Usually fictional stories that I just I couldn't like distance myself from them. So I thought that they could be part of the real world, even though I knew they were fiction, like Snow White. I mean, maybe it could happen. There were like these old folk tales of like monsters in forests and stuff like that, and those used to scare me. And and my parents took those things away from me and hid them so that I couldn't get at them, um, or they just gave them away. Sensitive people get excitable about all kinds of things. And I really believe that it's okay to to not let our kids or to not expose our kids to things that will upset them. I mean, my parents controlled what TV I watched with good reason. I mean, I there were some things that I did watch. Like I remember watching Perry Mason, which is a law show, with lawyers and trials. I watched that when I was younger, but I did not watch any scary movies at all. Not at all. I mean, I did not read scary books. So, because those were too much for me, just way too much for me. So it didn't really matter what other people were watching. It just mattered, what was going to affect me. Um, and I really think that anything that triggers a person to say mean stuff about themselves is not something you want to expose your kids to. I mean, there are ways to deal with those things. Like if it's school that makes him not feel good about himself, you would handle it a different way. But um, the fact also that he gets really, really upset when you tell him to put the game down um, tells me that he is dependent on that game for something. I don't use the word addiction. I think it's used way too loosely when talking about gaming. I know that it's possible to have an addiction to gaming. It is a legitimate diagnosis. But I think that a lot of parents, every parent I've talked to is concerned with gaming and screen use and how much time on screens. But it's also what we do in the world these days. So I think that it's really hard to understand this difference that we see because when we were kids, we were not doing these things. So, but I think calling it an addiction is jumping the gun, unless you get a diagnosis, of course. I think it's legitimate to say that somebody is dependent on a game or on watching screens or something like that. The other thing is that when kids are in the midst of their screen usage, especially if it's a game, I used to work in an office space with a lot of people, gamers, basically, people that were creating games. I live in the Seattle area, and we have a lot of people that are developing games. And a lot of them would come up to me and say, "Oh, I have ADHD also." And we would talk, and they told me that when you're creating a game, the idea is to find this algorithm that challenges a person enough so that they'll stay with the game, but also rewards them for staying with the game so that they'll keep staying with the game and they'll eventually want to spend money on the game. That spending money thing is like this line you never want to cross because then they've got you. So these games are designed to sort of, I want to say, catch you at a weak moment, let's say. so that you've sort of crossed into their world. And I don't mean that in some schizophrenic-y way or anything like that. But when you're playing a game, you are entering into a different world. And so for young kids or whoever might be immature emotionally, coming out of that world is about as painful as it sounds. I mean, imagine if you went through some sort of vortex into another world and then you were pulled back out, or just the difference when you're born, you're in one world, then you come out to another world. So let's say you're playing video games and you get into this new world and you're feeling super comfortable and focused, and then either that world turns on you so that you start, getting down on yourself, or a parent will pull them out of that world so that they have to go into a world that they're not prepared to go into. So either one of those is stirring up things that are not beneficial to our kids. One of the things I've read is that one of the ways to get a child out of their game in a kind way, helpful way, is to sit with them and start asking questions about the game so that you've entered their world also, and then you can also not pull them out of it, but invite them to leave, let's say, because the time is up or something like that. Let's see. Okay, so you use calming techniques. So the fact that the calming techniques don't work tell me that his reactions are outsized for him. His reactions are bigger than him, and they're bigger than you. So I really do think that I don't know what the game is, but it's too much for him. It doesn't really matter what the game is, but it's too much for him. I think, I think the same thing with putting kids to bed. If your child has a tantrum every night before they go to bed, you're probably putting the kid to bed too late. And I say this as a kid who for years and years and years and years and years had a 7:30 bedtime. I had a 7:30 bedtime. It went up all through elementary school. My bedtime was 7:30. In middle school, it went to 8:30. At the 10th grade and 11th grade, 10th, 10th grade and 11th grade, it was 9:30. And then 12th grade, I could decide my own bedtime. So, we are a sensitive group of people, and when parenting, that really has to be taken into consideration. There are a lot of things we just can't handle, but we keep wanting to try them just to see if this time it's going to be different. And usually it isn't. But that's also a drive that we have. Maybe this time will be different. It's like a magical thinking thing. Maybe this time I can watch it and it'll be fine. Maybe this time I can eat that thing and I won't throw up. Or maybe this time I can play this game and not get hit with a ball in the face or something. We have this way of not remembering or thinking that this time will be different. But you can see that this time it's not different. There's a pattern going on. I also I'm not sure about this, but you might want to consult a pediatrician about this, and because I am not a medical professional. So to ask, is there something I should be doing differently? As far as, I mean, you can ask a naturopathic doctor also. Are there are there supplements that he could use that possibly would work for him? Is there something? Is there some testing that we need to do? What do we need to do here? Um, okay. So it sounds like his anxiety levels are pretty high, and I know that's super scary. Um, and so that's why well, first of all, um, in our behavior workshop, we will be talking more about um, emotional regulation for sure. But also, I think, to check with um, his pediatrician or somebody else, like a naturopathic doctor um, or a therapist or something like that, just to kind of get some other input. Um, because 7 is, it's young to be. Now, at least the words you're using, I haven't seen him have one of these outbursts or tantrums, but the way you're describing it, it sounds pretty um, overwhelming for him and for you. So there may be something else going on. That often happens, like very, 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 very often happens that um, some there are very few neurodivergent conditions, so to speak, that just occur alone. Like pretty much nobody just has ADHD or just has an autism diagnosis. Usually there's something else going on, and often that something else is depression or anxiety. So that's why it's worth looking into, because it sounds like he's in pain. And um, that's debilitating. That's just debilitating. And turning it on himself and you is certainly not a habit we want him to get into. Um, so I think he's too young emotionally for this game, whatever it is, or for this series of games. I don't know what they are, but um, he may need to have some simpler kinds of games, is what I'm thinking. So I hope this helps for now. In our workshop, in our behavior workshop, we will be talking more about emotional regulation. And um, as I've mentioned in our behavior workshop, you can ask as many questions as you want. So we're at the beginning of the workshop, so hopefully this is a good starting place for you, and then we'll see where it goes from there. All right. Thank you for your email. I hope that my words are helpful and not discouraging. If you want to ask follow-up questions, please feel free to do that. You're welcome to continue the conversation. All right. Take care, and thank you very much for your question. If anybody else wants to ask a question, you can email me at coach@blockedtobrilliant.com. Take care, everybody.